Hello there, John Guturillo here, the counsellor of your listener. Thank you for joining me for this episode. As per usual, thank you to everyone who makes it possible for me to live my vision every day, whether it be my clients who allow me the privilege of entering into their lives to help them with their goals, whether it be my supporters and listeners of my podcast. Thank you to all of you. I appreciate your support. Today I'm going to be discussing that to which we could colloquially refer as reinventing the wheel. More specifically, what society is seeing in the form of new phenomena and new trends that are being treated as though there's some profound new discovery, but actually are just less effective manifestations of phenomena that humanity has always known. And some of them are going to be quite familiar to you. Now, before I begin, remember that this is not advice in any way. If you have concerns of any description, please consult a professional. And also, I genuinely do try to avoid placing negative judgment on individuals, but certain phenomena are questionable, and I see it as important that we question them, because otherwise we're essentially allowing ourselves to be deceived by our own ignorance if we don't question these ideas. To begin, Western humanity at least likes to think that it's enlightened, but in reality, throughout history, our basic human needs, our psychology and our motivations haven't changed as much as we like to think they have. Humans essentially all have the same basic needs. We all have biological needs for food, for water, for shelter. We have social needs to feel accepted and liked by other people. We have needs for security. We have an innate search for purpose on which most of us, if not all of us, embark. We all want to avoid anxiety about danger in the world and anxiety about death. We all try to seek simple answers to complex questions in life. Human functioning tends to work on these common bases and has for most likely all of history. In so many areas of life, though, we're quite smug. We like to think that we've invented new concepts and that we're more enlightened for it. But what we're actually doing often is taking existing concepts, using new names on irrational premises, defining them using different terminology and a different structure, and then pretending it's new when essentially these concepts are not new at all. And then by overcomplicating them, what we're actually doing is engaging with them and using them less effectively. And it's incredibly elitist, because what it essentially demonstrates is that we want to feel intelligent, but it doesn't equate to real-world improvement in how we live. In many ways, we're actually less competent. We're less aware of basic concepts in life that are absolutely fundamental to our existence. I'm going to be using a number of specific examples in order to exemplify what I mean here. The first of these examples is the phenomenon of influencers and new marketing approaches. Now, for those who may be unaware, influencers are essentially individuals who are known for their presence on the internet, especially through social media, and who essentially have the role of persuading people to accept certain products, trends, or ideas. There's actually no such thing as influencers as a distinct phenomenon in human functioning. An influencer is nothing more than a salesman or a marketer. And whether you like it or not, the psychology of buying and selling has been the same for most, if not all, of human history. People make decisions based on desires. Sometimes those desires equate to needs, sometimes they're purely desires. But people are creatures of desire, and if somebody presents to them ideas that appeal to people's hedonism and create for them enough of a pleasurable sensation, they will seek to pursue those ideas. Whether it be the notion that a certain product will make you look younger and you find physical attractiveness quite desirable, whether a certain product is purported to make your life more efficient and saving time is desirable to you, whether it's gym memberships because you want to have a nice body and attract people of the opposite sex, whether it's food because it's claimed to be healthier for you and you want to look after your body. Regardless of what's being sold, the psychology has remained exactly the same. It's the idea behind what is being sold that is attractive to people, and essentially influencers are nothing more than just salesmen of ideas. Now, people might try to play all sorts of semantic games and say, well, people don't specifically buy anything off of influencers. Yes, but a lot of these influencers are paid to advocate for certain product, services, ideas, or trends. So, in effect, their job is to persuade other people to spend money, not necessarily with them, but with someone else, so that they can make money. That is still sales, whether you like it or not. And whether you like to think that sales is a dirty word or not, or that money is evil and capitalism is the root of all evil, the fact is that if you genuinely admire influencers, then you have fallen subject to that very evil, and there's no other way to describe it. In many ways, influencers are no different to celebrities. They don't sell a tangible benefit necessarily, but people aspire to be like them because the idea of being attractive and receiving other people's attention and having high status and a lot of money appeals to people's hedonistic pursuits. People like to feel pleasure, and these phenomena give us pleasure. Whether or not they're good for us is a completely different matter. We are pleasure seekers by nature. Of course, influencers, like many celebrities, invent dreams that don't actually exist. They fabricate so-called dream lives that are displayed through social media and are only able to appear as dream lives because people can only see one specific facet of them on their screen. And often the life bears no resemblance to the dream that they're describing. It's not hard with a smartphone now to take pictures that look attractive and make your home look attractive with a few efforts, and take a photograph of a particular place and make it look nicer than it is. I'm an ex-photographer, I know how that works. People are deceived by it. Influencer culture is about inventing false hope, giving people a false sense of what's actually important in life, and selling it to vulnerable people. What I also want to make clear is that new marketing techniques don't make use of new principles. What changes is the final outlet. As I said, psychology of sales and buying has not changed. What's different now is that we've actually created unnecessary complications in the realm of marketing that actually makes marketing less effective, because there are more variables that could potentially work against the person doing it that have nothing to do with the quality of the product or service. For example, think about internet marketing. People treat it like it's some mystical new field, and some companies treat their internet marketers as if they're neurosurgeons selling their skills as unprecedented. But in reality, again, what you see on the internet is no different to what you see in a newspaper or magazine or on a billboard. You're receiving information that is intended to persuade you to spend money, and that's all it is. The problem with internet marketing is now people are forced to take unnecessary steps in order to have their products and services noticed. It's not just the quality of the products and services, it's not just how clever your marketing is, it's also having to satisfy algorithms so that artificial intelligence on the websites you're using choose to display your content over other people's content. The guidelines by which artificial intelligence algorithms decide the quality of your content are irrational in human sense. They make sense in the rather rigid world of a computer, but in the human world they make no sense. Case in point, how many websites have you seen that truly include only the content that you need and none of what you don't? Often websites are cluttered full of content, cluttered full of unnecessary links, cluttered full of unnecessary navigation. Why is that? It's not because it makes it easier to use. It often makes it harder to use because with all that content, it's harder for people to find what they're actually seeking. It's because the websites are designed to satisfy algorithms so that they can be more visible. Or an alternative explanation may be that they're designed to persuade people to spend more money. So instead of focusing on being the best at what they do in their industry, business owners are now having to engage marketing specialists in ways in which they wouldn't have necessarily had to, or simply spend more time than is necessary working on internet marketing when they could be working on their actual products and services. But just because it seems so complicated doesn't mean that people's minds have changed that much. Something that I'd also like to say is that the creator economy really does exemplify the downfall of society. And by the creator economy, I mean people who essentially make money off of posting any kind of material on social media. I mean, there are people who supposedly make millions just by reposting and reproducing media that they've seen. What does this say about us as a society, that we're willing to pay for this? We shouldn't need people to sell us ideas. We should know within ourselves what ideas are truthful, what ideas are useful to us, and what ideas are not, and we should pursue them ourselves. But essentially allowing people to get paid to tell you what to believe is not a sign of healthy functioning. The next specific example is to do with job titles and frameworks used within jobs. People these days are acting like they've invented new jobs just by giving them new titles, and this is an issue of what I've previously referred to as reification, which, for those who may not be familiar with my work, is the intellectual act of taking something which is essentially just an abstract construct, something that doesn't actually exist in the physical world, but is rather just an idea, and treating it as if it is a real phenomenon. And the reason that's relevant is that often when we give a new title to a job, the actual essence of what that person is producing in their job hasn't changed, but we use new terminology to make people feel as though what they're doing is actually refreshing. And in reality, they're doing the same job that has been done for a long time. I'm not going to deny the importance of the jobs themselves, but the act of trying to manipulate how people feel using language that way is just ultimately deceptive. Let me reiterate some examples which I've previously mentioned in my program. In the mental health industry, apart from psychiatrists, psychologists, counsellors, and to an extent social workers, which are the traditional titles used to refer to mental health practitioners, we now have psychosocial recovery coaches, peer support workers, and positive behaviour support practitioners. Now, if you look at the definition of what a counsellor does, a counsellor is somebody who talks to another person or a group of people and teaches them psychological strategies to solve problems, the problem possibly being with regard to life skills, mental health, or other aspects of living. Then what all of these people do is essentially counselling, and that's great. But people who play semantic games will say, no, it's different. Counselling is about this, recovery coaching is about that, peer support work is about that, positive behaviour support practice is about that. But in reality, all of them involve the same key elements. They're used for different purposes. For example, specifically, recovery coaches are under the National Disability Insurance Scheme. They help their clients set and achieve goals and help to connect them with the right services, so not far from what a social worker traditionally does. Peer support workers tend to provide emotional support to their clients, but do it from a perspective of lived experience, that is to say, from a perspective of having had mental illness themselves. Positive behaviour support practitioners work under the National Disability Insurance Scheme as well, and they specifically work with people who are exhibiting dangerous behaviours or their carers or families and help them implement specific plans to help them reduce and hopefully eliminate those behaviours using humane methods, none of the coercive methods of yesteryear. But ultimately, that is all a form of psychotherapy in some sense. The essence of sitting down with people and using knowledge of psychology to help them change their perspectives and achieve goals in their life is counselling. Treating it like a different profession is not going to change what you actually have to do to be competent in those professions. In fact, as I said, often when we reinvent the wheel, we worsen our practice. And in these cases, what I've often seen is people treat high-level knowledge of psychology as impressive, or they treat it as something that's nice to have. But in reality, what happens in a lot of these professions is people only look at the surface. They look at what they can see immediately and then they work with it. Whereas proper mental health support, regardless of what your title is, involves understanding the basic functionings. What's human psychology founded on? What are basic human desires? What are basic human needs? What are basic motivations for human functioning? How are these manifest in different mental illnesses? Where do they become maladaptive? What's the nature of mental illness? What's the essence of it? What's the phenomenology? What's actually happening in the mind when someone's experiencing an episode of mental illness? What's the evidence to suggest that certain techniques work and others don't? How do you best implement those techniques? If you don't know that, what you essentially become is someone who just sits there and reassures people, which it's effective if you're a friend, but if you're a professional, you need to be doing more than that. Or somebody who's just checking boxes. Someone who's basically doing nothing more than what a person can do for themselves. Now, when I've worked in certain of these roles, I've always been allowed the freedom to do what I know is in my client's best interest, and it's always been appreciated. So I myself have been lucky with the people for whom I've worked. But in other cases, in other situations, what often happens is people who are not properly qualified to understand these phenomena, these mental illnesses, and these situations of people who are experiencing them, are hired because the company wants to be able to hire as many people as possible in order to streamline the process and make their business as profitable as it possibly can be. So they essentially manualize and subject these mental health practices to strict rules, and basically people with minimal knowledge of psychology are just being hired so that they can follow a set of guidelines in a manual. And I can tell you, no effective mental health practitioner does that. Some other rather misguided examples are when people refer to customer service staff as customer success managers or customer service superstars. Every job's important, but can we please stop trying to glamorize things? It's actually patronizing. We're trying to convince people that their jobs are more glamorous than they actually are. If you've ever worked in customer service, you'll know that you're often subjected to a ton of abuse by your customers and also your boss. A lot of people in those fields experience that. Your company is not going to treat you like a success, they're not going to treat you like a superstar. And if the company is large enough to want to adhere to this type of rhetoric and use this type of wordplay, the reality is that they probably don't really care that much about customers getting superstar service. Their one goal is to be profitable, and all they want you to do is parrot words out of a manual. That's what they want. It's similar for senior talent leads or talent acquisition managers for basically what are human resources representatives. Again, human resources are human resources, right? We all know what human resources are. And what you'll notice is that this type of language, this type of reinvented double talk is only used in corporate context, and the average person on the street uses traditional language. Now, people refer to it as destigmatization, or they say, oh, old labels are stigmatizing or dehumanizing to people. We should use these new labels because they acknowledge people's humanity. As I have explained in the past, when it comes to explaining how language works, language in and of itself is not stigmatizing or destigmatizing. It's the associations that we teach and learn with those particular words and phrases. So if you want to destigmatize something, here's what you do. Instead of calling your human resources representatives senior talent leads, instead of calling your receptionist or your customer service staff customer success superstars, here's what you do. Treat them better, train them well, encourage them to go above and beyond to give good customer service. And when customers are treating them poorly, you be right there to tell that customer to get out of the business and come back when they're willing to treat staff with respect. Because it's the lack of those factors that stigmatizes, that causes the stigma associated with these jobs. People hate the sound of the jobs because they know what happens to people who work them. If you really want to destigmatize those labels, don't worry about using labels that sound like they have more humanity, which is double talk. Actually treat people with more humanity. The actions speak louder than the words. And let me be honest with you. In the time that I've been in the workforce and have dealt with numerous different businesses, many businesses give great service, and kudos to them. But many give horrible service and just could not care less about how their clients perceive them. And terms like talent lead or customer success superstar are not changing that. Another example is to do with personal therapy and mental health programs, and I've discussed this extensively in my episode about life coaching and my criticisms of the industry, but to recapitulate briefly, it's quite popular in non-traditional therapies such as certain forms of contemporary spiritual counselling and life coaching for the practitioners to essentially act like they've invented some kind of profound new science. Again, as I've said before, and I'll say it again because you need to hear it, human psychology, since psychology started to be practiced over a century ago, the actual nature of human psychology has not changed that much. And many therapies take decades to properly test and develop because we need to ensure that enough people have actually been able to observe systematic effectiveness in order to consider them safe. Someone who claims they invented a new therapy 5 years ago, the likelihood is they haven't really invented anything. They've come up with a trendy program that sounds good to vulnerable people. I've seen what some of these programs contain, and quite frankly, there is a lot of core knowledge that the people who take these programs, these therapies, are not learning from them. It's core knowledge that I teach my clients because proper psychoeducation is key to proper therapy. A lot of these programs, they charge you a lot for them. They give you lots of materials that seem like they're incredibly insightful, nice little booklets with a nice portrait of the practitioner at the front. Usually it'll be a picture of them wearing a headpiece, speaking in front of what's probably assumed to be an audience of thousands. And they'll really sell themselves about just how experienced they are and how they broke a nail and had a fight with their best friend when they were 5. And it was so traumatizing to them that they decided to beat the system by becoming a top corporate mogul and then deciding to help people who were less fortunate by becoming a life coach instead. And in reality, they've just shifted the corporate ethos to a different market. They're just selling you what you want to hear and overcharging you for it. I'm proud of what I do, and I believe strongly in what I do, but I haven't invented anything new. I use evidence-based therapies. Why? Because they're more likely to actually work, they're more likely to be safe. Now, in conclusion, people don't like dealing with these types of topics because metaphysics, that is to say the nature of reality which can't be observed through the senses, is an extremely complex field. We like to think in concrete terms. We like to have simple answers to complex questions. We like to be told what to think. We like to have labels that sound nice. But When you explore the essence, okay, the core phenomena or event in nature, in objective reality that exists outside of our consciousness and that exists in and of itself without anything else distorting our perception of it, the core essence of much of how we live our life has not changed that much over time. We still have the same core psychology. We still engage in much of the same process and many of the same behaviours when making decisions, when thinking, when feeling. The change in the superficial aspects of how we live our life doesn't mean that we've changed at a deeper level, doesn't mean the essence has changed. And we need to start questioning the essence of phenomena. Is this really a new phenomenon, or is it just a new veil for what is essentially an old idea? That type of process is part of critical thinking. It's key to it. So thank you for joining me for this episode. As per usual, do not take what you heard today as advice. Seek help from a professional if you need it. And also, if you would like to hear me discuss a particular topic, or you'd like to be a guest on the program, or you'd like to collaborate with me, please contact me. I'd love to hear from you. And until next time, take care.